Here I am with the camera reflected in the plate glass window of a shop in an African city. I've obviously come here to film, but to film what? Not a documentary and not a feature picture. I've come to shoot some notes for a film, the Oresteia of Aeschylus, to be shot in the Africa of today, in modern Africa. For the Oresteia of Aeschylus, I've chosen an African nation that seems typical to me, a socialist country with pro-Chinese tendencies. But the choice isn't yet final because along with the Chinese attraction, there is another no less fascinating attraction, that of America, or rather of neo-capitalism. All of you know the story of the Oresteia of Aeschylus. I'll repeat it here in just a few words. I'll just tell the main events. We're in Argo, the city of King Agamemnon, who is now returning here from Troy, where he went to fight in the war. His wife, Clytemnestra, is waiting for him, but she's in love with another man, Aegisthus. So she's awaiting her husband with the intention of eliminating him, of killing him. Tattered and wearied, destroyed, Agamemnon returns with his army to the city, and through deceit, Clytemnestra murders him. In vain, Cassandra, the slave girl that Agamemnon brought with him from Troy, prophesies this horrible murder. Agamemnon and Clytemnestra have two children, Orestes and Electra. Electra is present at the crime, while Orestes is far from his homeland. When he grows up, and when he's about 20, Orestes returns to Argo, secretly meets Electra at the tomb of her father Agamemnon, and the brother and sister decide to take their revenge. Orestes, in disguise, presents himself at the court of Argo, and with a trick, he ferociously slays his mother, Clytemnestra. But as soon as he's killed his mother, he's assailed by the Furies, the goddesses of atavistic ancestral terror. Orestes flees and is protected by the god Apollo. The god advises him to turn to the goddess Athena, who is the goddess of democracy and reason, and therefore of the new city of Athens. The goddess Athena decides to help Orestes, but not from on high, not as a goddess. She wants to help him by submitting him to the judgment of other men. And thus she sets up the first human tribunal. This human court of democracy and reason absolves Orestes. The Furies are transformed by the goddess Athena from goddesses of ancestral terror into goddesses of what might be called dreams, of the irrational element that still remains alongside the rational democracy of the new state. The first thing I did was look for the characters of the drama as I roamed around Tanzania and also Uganda. I photographed dozens and dozens of people. This man could be Agamemnon, and so could this other one. Old Agamemnon returns weary from the Trojan War. Another variation, another possible Agamemnon, more legendary, more mythical. As you can see, this man is a Maasai. This could be Pylades, the faithful, devoted friend of Orestes, at his side all through the tragedy, though he utters only a few words. What he says is, "And how will the words of your God end, the sacred promises, the faith and oaths? It is better to have men for enemies than the gods." Behind this sinister black veil, the face of Clytemnestra could be hidden. This couldn't exactly be Cassandra, who was young and beautiful, but it could be one of Cassandra's magical gestures. Electra. Electra is the character hardest to find in the Africa of today. African girls, as you can see, are gay. They seem to lack any feeling of haughtiness, any severity, any hatred, the emotions that, on the other hand, drove Electra. They laugh. It seems as if they don't know how to do anything but laugh and accept life as a kind of holiday with their beautiful kerchiefs of every color, red, yellow, and blue. Orestes. I would like my film of the Oresteia in Africa to have an essentially folk quality, a story of the people. And therefore, I would like to give great importance to the chorus. In Greek tragedies, the chorus speaks in unison without moving beneath the stage. But here I want to spread the chorus through the realistic, day-to-day situation. Here we are on the shores of Lake Victoria, and here I began my search for the people of the chorus. This hut, in fact, on the shores of Lake Victoria, and the objects you see are all the objects that the inhabitants of this hut possess. They own nothing else. Here's the interior of the hut. The mother and her little boy with a neighbor woman. And down there is the father, who's been caught for a moment by the camera's indiscreet intrusion. Here instead, I'm in a ferry which crosses one branch of the lake. It is filled with workers and farmers, obviously on their way to the market. Here, the other bank of Lake Victoria. As we head towards the center of Africa, towards Kigoma, which is on Lake Tanganyika, directly opposite the Congo. As I was looking for the characters of the story, I also searched naturally for settings. Like the characters, the settings must be as real, as true as possible. Here we are on the road towards Kigoma, heading for the very center of Africa. This village is called Kazulu. It is still close to prehistoric times. These houses were built only recently. Probably until a few years ago, there was only a simple little market here. this little boy, another possible member of the chorus, is in fact taking us to the market. And here it is. Poor, abandoned, under the violence of the sun. And here's another little city which has risen just recently on a site where once there was probably nothing but a deserted part of the savannah or the forest where the farmers of the surrounding villages gathered for their market. And this is, in fact, another market. I repeat, the character of my film, of this Oresteia of mine, must be profoundly popular, a folk epic. The protagonist must be these people. Here's this woman drawing water from the well, this little boy. This elegant young man. The characters of the chorus chat and gossip around the filling station with the customers, the curious children, the tailors. The tailors and their customers naturally talk a great deal. They speak of powerful people, of politics. Of course, we won't overlook the barber. As in every part of the world, the barber's place is the scene of much talk and gossip. Here, in contrast, is the marketplace of a city, the city of Kigoma. The market is on the city's outskirts. More characters, young men who look a bit rough. And various children, curious children. And this, on the other hand, is what we might call a real old-fashioned market, the kind of market that must have existed here in the past, lost in the midst of the savannah, where the farmers gathered every now and then to exchange their goods. These people, glimpsed in their daily concerns, in their everyday life, should be the protagonist of my film, African Oresteia. Precisely because they are so realistic, so true, these people contain within themselves that mythic and ritual element which causes them to say things like this, for example. God, if that is your name, if you want me to call you with that name, I have weighed everything, I know only you, who can truly free me from the nightmare that lies upon my heart. Naturally, I will not neglect the factories of Africa, the continent's modern part. This is the exit of a factory in the vicinity of Dar es Salaam. The gate of this factory looks like others in every part of the world, with the girls coming out, and some of them old-fashioned, archaic peasant girls, while others are already skilled workers, modern, advanced types, such as this one, for instance. And along with the factories, I will not overlook the schools. This school is a very modern one near Kigoma, as you see. It's called Livingston because not far from the place where Livingston and Stanley met, thus circumscribing Africa, beginning the new modern epoch of African history. The young students are working according to the modern pedagogical theory. Along with their studies, there is also work. From the fields to reading. Here's a classroom full of respectful, ardent silence. African students look on the knowledge that is offered them with obedience, passive and humble. Now you have seen my notes, my travel jottings that have been useful to me in blocking out some situations and some characters in what should be my film on the Oresteia. First of all, I would like to tell you why I decided to make the Oresteia of Aeschylus in the Africa of today. The profound, essential reason is this. I feel I can recognize some analogies between the situation of the Oresteia and the situation of Africa today, especially concerning the transformation of the Furies, the Erinyes, into the Eumenides. In other words, I mean that the tribal civilization seems to me to resemble archaic Greek civilization. And Oreste's discovery of democracy, carrying it then into his country, which could be Argo in the tragedy and Africa in my film, is in a sense the discovery of democracy that Africa has also made in these last few years. And therefore, the first question I'd like to ask you is this. Do you think I should shoot this film in the Africa of today, in 1970, or would it be better to set the film back in the Africa of 1960, in the period when, practically speaking, the majority of the African states gained their independence?
Secondo me, o il mio giudizio, sarà che questo film avrà molto valore se sarà girato negli anni 60, insomma. Perché oggi l'Africa sta diventando moderna così e sta assomigliando un po' all'Europa. Sta perdendo un po' del suo proprio carattere tipico africano.
Siete tutti d'accordo con lui? L'Africa è un'altra, non è una nazione, ma è un continente.
True, but in fact, what I'm asking you, my first question is, should the story be set in 1970 or in 1960, and in what place? You, for example, what part of Africa would seem most typical to you for a thing of this sort?
Perché io non ho girato l'Africa.
Lei di dov'è? E conosce soltanto l'Etiopia.
Sì, ma non è che si devono avere Africa dicendo Africa abbraccia dal Mediterraneo fino all'ultimo punto, e quindi dall'Oceano Atlantico fino all'Oceano Indiano. Quindi dire Africa e non è una cosa.
Je voudrais, à propos de ce film, rappeler d'abord à son auteur qu'il ne faudra pas trop crier sur l'histoire du tribalisme en Afrique. Parce que les Européens, en général, ont trop crié sur le tribalisme pour commettre leur forfait. Alors, si on doit parler de l'Afrique, on parle d'une race et non de tribus, parce que lorsqu'on veut parler d'Italie, on ne parle pas des gens de Calaria, et lorsqu'on veut parler de France, on ne parle pas des gens on ne parle pas des Bretons. C'est tout ce que je vais ajouter.
We mustn't be afraid of reality. Truth is neither beautiful or ugly. It is what it is. So if there are tribes in Africa, and if, for example, we suppose that the Igbo tribe feels that it's different from the Hausa tribe, this is a reality.
La question des tribus, mais on en parle de trop. Et lorsqu'on commet un forfait au Nigeria, on parle de tribus du Biafra. Au Congo, on parle du Katanga. Et c'est pour ça que je demande que lorsqu'on parle du Congo, qu'on parle des Congolais, et lorsqu'on parle du Nigeria, qu'on parle des Nigériens, et non du Biafra, parce que lorsqu'on parle d'Italie, on parle des Italiens.
Yes, what you say is very interesting, but I'd like to point out something else. Who was it who made the borders of the Congo and Nigeria? They were made by colonials. And so the Nigerian reality is a reality created at a table by the European masters. They drew the lines, they made a Nigeria, but it doesn't correspond to the reality of Nigeria.
Io trovo che c'è il pericolo quando lei parla di democrazia. Per un africano che vede il film, per esempio, non so se la civilizzazione così europea, moderna, ci abbia portato proprio la democrazia come si intende di solito.
Sì. Ma allora...
Yes, of course. You make a very interesting observation and one that strikes home. But when I say democracy, I don't mean real democracy. I mean formal democracy. In other words, when Orestes arrived in Athens and Athena set up the first human tribunal, that is, for the first time, a court of men rather than gods, I say that a great step forward in human history is made, but it is purely formal. Then this form must be filled with real democracy.
sono pratico del film, però non lo vedo la connessione.
Are you all in agreement with him? Or does anybody see the connection, a possible connection?
Secondo me formalmente l'idea si può anche verificare, solo che rimarrà un po' qualcosa di immaginativo così. Cioè nella realtà sarà abbastanza difficile, almeno la realtà odierna, nella realtà odierna. Forse se le ambienta il film negli anni 60, 50, però il legame si può trovare.
The other characters remain to be sought, the Furies. But the Furies cannot be depicted in human aspect, and therefore I would like to portray them in non-human guises. These trees, for example, lost in the silence of the forest, are somehow monstrous and terrible. The terrible aspect of Africa is its solitude. The monstrous form that nature can assume. The deep and frightening silences. Irrationality is animal. The Furies are the goddesses of man's animal moment. This wounded lioness could also be a Fury, lost in her blind suffering. The Furies of the Oresteia of Aeschylus are destined to be defeated, to disappear. With them, there disappears the world of the forefathers, the ancestral world, the ancient world. And in my film, a part of ancient Africa is destined to disappear with them. But it's time to begin telling the story. This could be the guardian who, at Clytemnestra's command, is on the tower near Argo. He's keeping an eye out for the return of Agamemnon's army, which should be announced, according to agreement, by a series of fires lighted first on Mount Ida near Troy and repeated as far as the vicinity of Argo. But here we can read an excerpt from the Oresteia of Aeschylus. And he who was able to warn them so promptly was the god of fire, burning upon Ida. Behind him, a whole luminous chain was gradually kindled all the way to us. Ida flashed towards the chasms of Lemnos, and the glowing signal flew from Lemnos and was reflected upon Athos, in the realm of Zeus, the third stage. From there, with a leap that burned the vital barrier of the sea, the message-bearing ray fell joyously. From stage to stage, until the sun of the night was glowing over the heights of Mesistus. A light still stronger was needed to cover even greater distances. It was driven over the Bay of Gorgopis to the mountain of Aegoplanthus. The new fire was driven not to delay a moment. The brazier was alight with mad glowing. A shroud of flames, so great, it leapt over the Saronic Straits, plunging to touch Mount Arachne near Argo, falling upon the Atrides roof, the last link of the chain that began at Troy. These are notes for a possible flashback to the Greek army below the walls of Troy, and then the Trojan War following the words of the chorus, which often refers to these scenes in the tragedy. This could be the camp of the Greeks, and this is a review of the heroes, the leaders, Agamemnon, Menelaus, Ajax, Ulysses. These could be Greek soldiers drilling under the command of a Thersites, naturally. These scenes were not shot by me. They were taken from newsreel film shot during the Biafra War. But this war must not be regarded as a specific war as the Biafra War, precisely. This is war in the abstract. Its images are abstract. Metaphors of what could be the depiction of the war between the Greeks and Trojans. Naturally, as I said before today, the great protagonist of my film, for which these are only notes, must be the people. And so during this war, we see the humble soldiers who are tortured and wounded and killed. This could be a scene of Troy burning. These could be images and aspects of the sack of Troy, the slaughter, and the destruction which took place immediately after the conquest. Nothing could be farther from the image than the idea we normally have of classical Greece. And yet, suffering, death, mourning, tragedy are eternal, and absolute elements which can easily link these searingly up-to-date scenes with the fantastic images of ancient Greek tragedy. But a sudden idea forces me to break off this kind of story, ripping apart that style without style, which is the style of documentaries and of notes. My idea is this: to have the Oresteia sung rather than acted. To have it sung, to be precise, in the idiom of jazz, and in other words, to choose as singers and actors a cast of black Americans. This choice would not be without significance, because if some American singers and actors agree to shoot in Africa a film on the African Renaissance, obviously this cannot take place without a specific meaning. It would be well to clarify to all, in fact, that 20 million black members of the American sub-proletariat are the leaders of any revolutionary movement in the Third World. We're in a semi-underground studio in an old Western city, and here we're making our first notes for this new project. The scene chosen for this note is the great scene of Cassandra at the beginning of the tragedy. Those who speak are Cassandra and the chorus. The situation is this. Bringing with him the slave girl Cassandra, Agamemnon has just returned. He is tired, disheartened. He has seen too much and has little belief now in honors. The city welcomes him sadly because there isn't a single citizen who is unaware of the new reality in store for the king. His wife, Clytemnestra, who is already prepared for his death, shows him into the palace, leading him over costly carpets. And thus, the husband and wife enter the palace and disappear from view. And at this point, Cassandra has a vision of the murder, which is being carried out beyond the wall.
pride, and he behold in it the poor my son, and there it is, the bloody snare, afflicted man. Oh, where, yes, Lord, do not let me hear, where, God, is not in death as well.
Heavenly force has struck you if you sing this bitter song. You are like the nightingale that desperately sings the same verse without peace. Always like his heart that sings of life, filled only with grief.
No, no, I'm not the nightingale the gods have bestowed upon him, a winged body and a sweet life, and only the knife that kills knows me.
Some God has perhaps bewitched you and forced you to sing these songs of mortal pain. Who knows how it will
But now my oracle shall go no longer veiled like a young woman who weds. Now my oracle shall go no longer veiled like a young woman who waits, like a wind that touches the first sunlight. It will expand and reflect against that light, a wave of pain more desperate still. I shall no longer speak obscurely, albeit you can say that like a dawn I have found the trial of ancient crimes. In this house, the chorus that abounds is tuneless and grating and sings of death. And to strengthen its voice locked inside this happy company, this chorus of the Furies, it has swallowed blood and grown drunk on it. Within his house they sing the song of the first kiss.
now we're back in Africa. Here's a note on the violent death that Cassandra's vision prophesied. But here I have no words for commentary. This little plot of disturbed earth, freshly dug, rectangular, with clumps of grass at the corners, is a grave I found near a hut. A grave like this could also be the grave of Agamemnon in my film of the African Oresteia. I asked the people living in the hut beside this grave, a father and a daughter, to repeat the same gestures and say the same words they use when they come to bring offerings and to pray at the grave of a relative. Very carefully, they did what I asked of them. And this is precisely a note on what might be the scene of Electra's coming to pray at the grave of her father. Here is a translation of the verses of Aeschylus. God of the underworld, King of the living and the dead, grant that this prayer of mine be heard by the spirits beneath the earth, the terrible witnesses of my father's murder, and by the earth herself, mother of us all, she who has nourished us and who gathers us unto herself to germinate new life, as I pour this blessed water for the dead and pray to my Father. Father, have pity on me and on your son Orestes. Let us become once more the masters of our house. Now we are only two homeless ones without hope. Our own mother has brought us so low. She who is married Aegisthus, the accomplice of her crime. I am alive, a slave. Orestes lives in exile, and those two triumph, rich with your wealth. Let a divine force bring Orestes back here. This is what I ask of you. Hear me, Father. And this is a note that's different from the others. In fact, I shot this scene as if it were the real scene of my film. This is the moment when Orestes arrives at his father's grave. God, God, look down on our wretchedness. Here the eagle's offspring are without their father. He died in the coils of an impure serpent, and pitiless hunger frightens these orphans, because these fledglings are not yet able to carry the father's prey to the nest. The same fate for me and for her, Electra. Look at us, orphans, banished from our house. If you allow this brood to die of a man who was your devoted servant and who worshipped you, where will you find such a generous hand to honor you? If you allow the eagle's brood to perish, you will be unable to send more signs from heaven to this royal race. this horrified root of greatness, will no longer be able to fill your altar. Save us. You can make this house great again, which now is nothing but an enormous ruin. Orestes then prepares to avenge his father and kill his mother with his own hands. But as soon as he has killed his mother, there is the apparition of the Furies, which forces him to flee from his homeland. He goes off, therefore, and the Furies follow him, singing the ancestral song of terror and remorse. With raving calculation, now high, now low, my foot flees and stumbles. The evil is beyond repair. But now Apollo, the god who protects Orestes, speaks to him. Flee and never grow weary. And if they seek you in the immense world, they follow you in all the places where you go, even beyond the sea, even in cities surrounded by water. Never grow weary of the suffering you must undergo before you reach the land of Athena. And Orestes goes off along the roads of the world, persecuted, terrified, and yet determined to gain his purification. This is Kampala, the capital of Uganda, which could represent the ancient and modern city of Athens. Now Orestes is in front of the temple of Apollo. The temple of Apollo, as I will depict it metaphorically in my film of the African Oresteia. I will show it as a university, and to be precise, the University of Dar es Salaam, which, seen from a distance, displays unmistakable signs of resembling the typical Anglo-Saxon neo-capitalistic university. The external aspect, elegant and confident in design, the internal organization, make it a typical university of the kind that is frequently seen in Black Africa. These universities, as I repeat, follow a progressive neo-capitalistic pattern, and they are the seat of the future local intelligentsia in the culture and learning of the young African nations. In fact, they illustrate all the internal contradictions of these young African nations. Here we are at the college bookshop, and here these contradictions that I've been speaking of are evident and unabashed and exemplary. Here's this plaque, for example, over the entrance. It says that the building is the fruit of help from the people and the government of China. But the books displayed in the shop window show the other alternative, the neo-capitalist Anglo-Saxon alternative, to be precise. Following the advice of Apollo, Orestes reaches Athens, the new city, which I have represented here for the present, with footage that was shot at Kampala, Dar es Salaam, and Kigoma. The new city is a source of endless amazement to Orestes, who arrives from the barbaric, feudal, religious Argo. The goddess Athena, the goddess of the new Athenian democracy, the goddess of reason, then decides to help Orestes, and according to the text of Aeschylus, here are her words. I can only summon judges. The judges will take their oath, and the court thus formed will decree for the infinite time of the future. You collect your proof, your witnesses, bound by oath, and I will return with the best men of the city that they may impartially express their judgment. The first lessons of history, therefore, imaginatively depicted by the first lessons of independent Africa. Here we are outside the court. In fact, it's the court of Dar es Salaam, where Orestes is to be judged. Citizens of Athens, listen to what I have decided. You, who for the first time in the world judge a crime. From now on, the people will have the right to this assembly of its own. With these words, Athena establishes the first lessons of history. And she continues, let not anarchy nor dictatorship ever stand before you, O citizens, but let not authority be wholly banished. No one does his duty without some fear. If you respect this order always, you will live at peace within the circle of your walls, as no other people in the world ever has. This assembly that I establish today will remain uncorrupted, venerated, pure, to watch over the peace of the land. And this is my augury also for the future. Rise now, bring your vote, and judge loyal to your oath. And so Orestes will be judged. The Furies accuse him in the name of the archaic feudal religious world. Athena defends him, and Orestes will be absolved.
Ecco, allora la domanda che vorrei farvi non è una domanda seria, è divertente.
Now, the question I'd like to ask you is this. It isn't a serious question. It's amusing, so answer any way you please, even joke if you like. This is the question. You've seen a young man who's left his ancient world with its old ideas, beliefs, and so on, the son of a tribal chief, because Agamemnon, after all, is a kind of chief. This young man comes and has experiences in the modern Western world of courts, big buildings, hotels, and above all, universities. You all are university students, and so now what I'd like to ask you is this. Do you feel a little bit like Orestes?
Sì, perché noi siamo arrivati qui per studiare e per conoscere il mondo occidentale. Qui adesso abbiamo, come si chiama, abbiamo conosciuto molte cose nel campo della civiltà, nel campo del, come si chiama, progresso, nel campo dello studio. Cioè, come si chiama, Oreste era, come ho visto, era un uomo che conosceva qualcosa. Quindi, in certo senso potremmo rappresentare Oreste.
Then you think that all of you in some way resemble this character because you've been driven by a need for knowledge, and to satisfy this need, you've come to know a world different from your own world, in short.
Io direi che, come ha detto il collega, se ci sentiamo Oreste, solo che non è che tutti noi siamo figli di un capotribù. Questo no. Uno può, non so, andare all'estero, abbiamo la civilizzazione occidentale, siamo venuti qui per studiare. Qualcuno di noi potrebbe essere figlio di un capotribù, ma in un certo senso sì, siamo tutti Oresti, possiamo rappresentare Oreste, solo che il capotribù non è che in ogni famiglia c'è un capotribù.
I mentioned a tribal chief to say that Agamemnon, after all, is a kind of chief. In any case, you, all of you, or at least 90% of you, come from families that have a certain economic possibility.
Oppure questa immaginazione potrebbe anche dare l'immaginazione di una persona, cioè stanca della sua vita e che tende verso l'esplorazione di un nuovo mondo, cioè verso la conoscenza di una nuova civiltà, che tende verso il miglioramento, diciamo. A me personalmente mi potrebbe dare questa immaginazione, cioè questa idea.
From these first answers, it seems to me that you've underlined the fact that coming like Orestes to a modern world, you will know something new and positive. But are you sure that everything you learn in the Western world is positive and that what you've left is all negative?
Non credo che sia completamente negativo il mondo che abbiamo lasciato e che la nostra somiglianza con Oreste è piuttosto, diciamo, formale. Non è che veniamo a scoprire un mondo migliore, scopriamo un mondo nuovo che ha delle
certe proprietà migliori, non è che...
Moi, je crois que l'expérience de Oreste dans le monde occidental pourrait être utile dans le cas où, en retournant chez lui, par exemple, il ne pourrait pas confondre, ou bien assimiler l'expérience qu'il a eue aux méthodes anciennes qui existent chez lui. Par exemple, je voudrais dire par là l'aliénation culturelle. Il ne faudrait pas qu'il soit aliéné. S'il est aliéné dans ce cas-là, sa venue dans le monde extérieur serait négative. Il faudrait qu'il transpose, mais d'une manière plus humaine, ce qu'il a appris dans le monde occidental chez lui.
I believe that's a very just and very intelligent observation. And so I would like to ask if the way to keep from being alienated in the consumer civilization of the modern West might also be given him by the very fact that he is African. He could thus oppose to the Western way of knowledge an original spirit of his own, which would keep the things he learns from being mere notions for consumption and make them real personal ideas.
Je n'ai pas très bien compris la question, mais je crois que ce qu'il a appris, par exemple, peuvent l'aider à approfondir les connaissances, si je veux dire, anciennes, c'est-à-dire de son milieu rural où il vivait auparavant.
This leads me to the second question. The film ends, as I've said before, with the transformation of the Furies into Eumenides. And this is a kind of synthesis. How could the transformation of the Furies into the Eumenides be represented?
Non so, questa trasformazione così dall'uno all'altro non credo che si possa ottenere completamente, perché esiste sia l'uno che l'altro e esisterà sempre, secondo me, perché l'africano fondamentalmente è un uomo così, possiede una vita interiore molto, molto profonda, uno spirito molto profondo. Quindi quando lei parla di furie che si trasformano in Eumenidi, non so, probabilmente potrà crearsi delle Eumenidi senza che le furie spariscono, ma che spariscono completamente credo che sarà abbastanza difficile.
My film will be very dated. We have seen that 1960 was the year when the greater part of the African states in a very short period had to regain a time gap of centuries, you might even say of millennia, achieving independence and democracy. Even the conclusion can only be dated, since it can only refer to the African ideology of those years, which probably had its symbol in Senghor, the president of Senegal. The idea that the new Africa, the Africa of the future, can only be a synthesis of the modern, free, independent Africa with the ancient, ancestral Africa. How can I represent this transformation of the Furies into the Eumenides? Wandering with my camera along the roads of Tanzania and Uganda, for example, I made this encounter in this deserted place in the savannah. We're with the Bagogo tribe, one of the many tribes that make up the nation of Tanzania. And there I filmed this dance. A dance in ancient times, ancient after the manner of speaking, because until a few years ago, was virtually a rite with its meanings, precise and religious, perhaps cosmogonic. Now instead, as you can see, the Bagogo people in the same place where once they did these things seriously, now repeat them, but they repeat them gaily to amuse themselves, draining their gestures of their ancient sacred meaning and doing it as if out of sheer merriment. Here's a metaphor of the kind that could also be the transformation of the Furies into the Eumenides. Let's read again the text of Aeschylus. The Furies, as soon as Orestes has been absolved, shriek with grief, offended in their very sacredness, and they protest against Athena, and Athena tries to persuade them with these words. I understand your wrath. You are older than I. But if your experience is greater, God has given to my experience the gift of reason. Go. Go then into another land. You will regret this one, I know. The days of the future will give greatness to my people. And if you are here in the glorious center of this city, you will see processions of men and women bringing you offerings, such as no other people of the world before. The Furies allow themselves to be convinced by Athena's words, and they agree to coexist with her, the goddess of reason. They, the goddesses of irrationality, in the new world, in the new, free, independent, democratic world. Here we are in Dodoma, a city in the heart of Tanganyika. And here we are in the center of a situation such as the dance of the Wagogo, which can very well represent poetically and metaphorically the transformation of the Furies into the Eumenides, in the very sense that I was mentioning before. In fact, these headdresses, this way of walking, these dancing motions, these gestures, these face tattoos, are all signs of an ancient magic world. Here is a symbol that is even today, when you see it, to tell the truth, ghastly and sinister. But this magic world is presented here, as you see, in the form of tradition, an ancient, independent spirit that will not allow itself to be lost. In this case, we are at a wedding celebration, and all these luxuriously dressed people with draperies and the loveliest kerchiefs are going to celebrate with the bridal pair. Here is the mattress on which the couple will sleep. Dancing happily and slowly, the procession approaches the house of the couple. In an internal courtyard, here are some women, evidently paid, clearly even more than the others, the custodians of that ancient spirit that I was talking about. And here in my film, these could quite well be the Furies transformed into the Eumenides. But let's listen to the words that Athena addresses to the Furies as soon as they've been transformed. I carry out this impulse of my love for this city, housing you here as patronesses, great, restless, mysterious powers. You will control every human relationship. He who does not understand that it is right to accept among us these primitive divinities does not understand the contrasts of life, and the barbarism of the fathers that is atoned for in their presence is an unconscious wickedness, despite the cry of his conscience, which can bring him to dark ruin. Here, on the other hand, we are in the inner courtyard of the house, where, as you see, a more modern festivity is taking place, a party very similar to any European party of ours. But here, too, in this modern attitude, and in this modern music, you can feel the residue of that ancient spirit that I've been talking about. transformed, as you see, into moments of happiness, of festivity and grace, into lightness and lightheartedness. These are traits very typical of the African spirit. There's a great freedom and a great openness towards the future in the Africans. These are the gifts that the guests are bringing to the bridal couple. We're at the door of the couple's house, and now their guests are still bringing their gifts very, very picturesquely and with a great deal of grace. And here are the final notes for a conclusion. The new world is established. The power to decide one's own future is formally, at least, in the hands of the people. The ancient primeval divinities coexist with a new world of reason and liberty. But how to conclude? Well, the ultimate conclusion doesn't exist. It's suspended. A new nation is born. Its problems are infinite. But problems are not resolved. They must be lived. And life is slow. The proceeding towards the future is without any temporal break. The labor of a people knows no rhetoric and no pause. Its future lies in its eagerness for a future. And its eagerness is also a great patience.